This was really awesome.
Amen.
Yeah, the worship was fantastic. I could feel the heaven right here. Yeah, have a seat in the presence of God. Oh, it's wonderful. I didn't want it to stop. I want the atmosphere to continue. This was really great. Really great. Beloved, God has a wonderful plan for your life. And so does everybody else. And so does everybody else. God has a plan for your life, and so does everybody else. You see, that's the problem we'll address today. If you allow others to impose their plan on you, there is a very real danger you'll not fulfill God's plan for you. So, just as God has a plan for you, everybody else has a plan for you. So you have really to keep stuck on the God's plan for you. See, maintaining healthy boundaries in our relationships with other people, that's our subject this evening. Last week we moved toward that with a discussion about setting boundaries on our own behavior. Do you remember? We talked about self-discipline. We talked about managing our own emotions in a way that does no harm to others. We talked about respecting other people's boundaries, right? Not manipulating or controlling other people in our lives. Now, if we want to respect the boundaries others set towards us, it's unrealistic and unfair to think they will respect the boundaries we set toward them. See? So, we addressed self-discipline because that significantly affects our ability to set firm boundaries towards others. So, I know our subject, the subject of setting boundaries is vast, and we don't have the time, but we'll deal it in this. We'll do a few observations. The first observation is boundaries are about asserting responsibility for our own behavior. So when we talk about setting boundaries toward other people, we are not saying that we set their boundaries on their behavior. Ultimately, they must do that themselves. But we were saying that we set boundaries on what we will accept into the relationship. We make our own choices about what we will do, about the specific behavior the other person exercises. For example, I'll give you a quick example. You go to a company, it employs you. They say, oh, we'll pay you 600 pounds a week. Now, two weeks go by, they pay you 400. Another in fact, that happened to me when I was back home. They wouldn't pay the full salary. They would say it will come next week, next month. Then they pay only the allowances, and so. But it's up to me to make a decision. What do I do? Do I allow that to happen, or do I make it? You see, you have to set boundaries on what you will accept and what you will not. So I complained. I did all I could, but they didn't change. So, but that's why I appreciated so much your word of encouragement today. There, God intervened. God intervened thoroughly. I was fed up with what could I do? I wanted to get out of that job. I had to go. So, God arranges things in His own way. That's why He says He will personally do it. Oh, I like that. I like that. I come here to attend a conference, and as if they knew I needed a job, someone offered me a job. He says, would you like to join my university and teach for me? In the United States. I said, oh, let me think about it, I said. But I said, oh God, you really knew I was ready to go. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is you make your own decisions about a relationship. What will you accept and what you will not. So I set boundaries on what is acceptable to me, and I decide what I will do based on that. I don't solve the problem by trying to control other people's behavior. I solve the problem by deciding what I will do. So the consequence of this decision may be that I'm no longer doing the work for them. The key principle is this: I have authority to make decisions about what I will do, and I will make the decisions of my own free will. I will not try to control or manipulate you. I may reason with you, and try to find mutually acceptable terms, but I will not try to control you, and I will not allow you to control me. That's the way to do it. The second thing, the second observation I want to make, our ability to set healthy relational boundaries flows out of our own self-respect and personal identity. Now, if you don't know who you are in Christ Jesus, then you will allow to be manipulated. You need a core sense of dignity that is projected in your interaction with other people. Maintaining healthy boundaries enforces that core self-respect. So, the stronger your core sense of identity and self-respect is, the easier it will be to establish healthy boundaries. Paul said, by the grace of God, I am who I am. That is in first letter of Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 10. By the grace of God, I am what I am. 1 Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 10. And in Ephesians, chapter 2, verse 8, he says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves is the gift of God. So your core identity has to come out of a revelation of who God has made you to be in your innermost being. We don't have time to deal with that today, but we certainly cannot overlook it because it's the beginning point of everything, knowing who you are. The influence of the Holy Spirit enables us to produce the fruit of the Spirit, which includes self-control. This is why I had to begin last week with the boundaries we set on ourselves in terms of self-discipline. The more I understand who I am in Christ, the more I'm motivated to live accordingly. Okay? The more I live consistent with my values, the more affirmed I feel in my identity. The identity is there by a gift of God, but by my level of confidence, it depends on my living that experience. This is why John wrote, for if our heart condemns us, God is greater than our heart and knows all things. Beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence toward God. Oh my God. The devil is always tempting you to violate your own conscience and then condemning you for the sin, because that undermines your confidence. So, obedience to God gives us solid footing for enforcing relational boundaries. So let me just pause and say, none of us do this perfectly. That's why Jesus taught us to pray daily. He says, and forgive us our sins, for we also forgive. That's Luke chapter 11. So, living in self-control, living consistent with our inner values strengthens our fortitude to set healthy boundaries. Then the relationships that come out of setting healthy boundaries affirms our sense of self-respect. There is an important complementary relationship here between self-esteem or self-identity and the discipline of living consistent with our values and maintaining of healthy boundaries in our relationships. There is a third observation I want to make. Boundaries provide space and autonomy. Boundaries define what is me and what is not me. What is mine and what is yours. Boundaries let me know what I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for. I'm finite, I'm not infinite. I can't do everything. I cannot be responsible for everything. I cannot be responsible for things that have no decision-making authority over. So the text must be kept in mind. You remember the text we had last week, Romans 14:12. He says, so then each of us shall give account of himself to God. For my relationships to be healthy, I must thoroughly understand this basic principle. I'm responsible for me and my choices, not you and your choices. If it's your own son or your own daughter, you are not responsible for their choices. You can give advice, you can do whatever, you can give help and so on, but ultimately it's their own choice. So in any given situation, what I have to do is make sure I do what is right. If I try to make you do what is right, I've crossed a crucial boundary. If I try to control your behavior, I will fail because it's outside my realm of authority. Are there any rescuers in the house? some of us are by nature rescuers. We find ourselves trying to fix people if we are not careful. And the whole time we are trying to help them, they are resenting us. Why? Because we are violating their dignity and going to give an autonomy. In the parable of the prodigal son, the father did not try to fix his son. You remember? He loved him dearly, but he never tried to fix him. He was available to receive him back, but do you remember? He never followed him to the pig pen. He let him wallow in it until he got sick, tired of it himself, and ready to change. And he came back. He was ready to welcome him. So when the younger son repented and returned to his father, the elder son got angry. Yeah? You remember the story? That the father was throwing a party in a celebration. Now the elder son sat outside there pouting. Why are they making a party for that prodigal thing? Again, the father reasoned. He explained what he was doing. He encouraged the son to enjoy the party. The elder son's pouting did not control the father. The father did not cancel the party, because the elder son was upset. No. It was the right to celebrate. The elder son could pout if he chose to. That was his choice. That's what he would do. But as for the father, the party goes on. So, in John 5, when Jesus approached the crippled man at the pool of Bethsaida, before he did anything for the man, do you know what he asked him? He said, do you want to be made well? On the surface, this sounds mighty strange, because the man is lying there waiting for so many years for the waters to be troubled, so he can be made well, or so it would seem. But Jesus is respecting the individual's boundaries. If you don't open the gate to me, I will not come crashing in, even if I mean so much good to you. I will not crash through your fence. If you want me to make you well, then I will. But if you don't want to get well, I will not try to fix you. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, Jesus says to the church at Laodicea, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me. Now, think for a moment. Who is standing at the door and knocking? He could come in any time. This is Jesus, the head of the church. With one word, he could knock the door down. or go through the wall. But he respects the individual boundary. He patiently stands and knocks, waiting for the door to be opened from the inside. The fourth observation I want to make: boundaries maintain mutual acceptable levels of interdependence and intimacy. For relationships to be healthy, both parties must be free to make their own choices. Both parties need to feel respected. Both parties need to feel the relationship is mutually beneficial. I was in a relationship with another party in business, back home again. When the relationship began, the interdependence was mutually beneficial and everyone was happy. We would sit down, make decisions together. But as time went on, he began to slowly manipulate the situation, taking more and more authority and excusing himself more and more from responsibility. You know, he would wait for me to finish this before I can go to another. Why? I say, why don't you go? No. You'll wait. And then I started to see, this is not what we agreed. I soon discovered that he did not know how to collaborate on a mutually acceptable solution. Instead, the stance became even more controlling. So what should I do in this situation? Should I fight him and try to make him do the right thing? What I could do is simply make my own choices about what I would do and let him make their choices about what they would do. So the level of interdependence was no longer acceptable to me. Sometimes the only solution to a toxic relationship is to reduce the level of interdependence, right? To an acceptable level. We do not have to be angry to do that. We just have to be intentional. Don't be angry, don't fight him. No, just be intentional. Make clear that this is what we thought, and this is what is not happening. Abraham found himself in a situation where the interdependence between him and Lot, remember, was no longer working. So, what did Abraham do? Abraham said, set a boundary that resolved the conflict. He said, so Abraham said to Lot, please, let there be no quarrel between us. You are my nephew. Let there be no quarrel between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land there before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I'll go to the left. You never hear of strife between the two again, do you? Imagine my neighbor and I have no fence between our yards. We mutually decide that we will share the yards together. When he gets time, he will mow all of it. And when I get time, I will... At first it works well. But half the time he's mowing and half the time I'm mowing. But as time goes by, he generates a lot of good excuses of why he can't mow. It slowly gets where I'm mowing about 80% of the time. Additionally, he feels emotional, he feels free, emotional garbage in our yard. We must not dump ours in the yard. So, we decide. I make a decision. I said, I think we better put a fence. I'll do my do yours. Okay? So, there's a fifth observation I want to make. Boundaries should be modeled by parents and learned by children in the home. Unfortunately, that model is often distorted. An extreme case of boundary violation would be incest. But there are many ways in which the model can be distorted. Some parents give no respect to the child's autonomy. The child is dominated and disrespected. You know there are some homes like that. He's told what to do and his opinion counts for nothing. Other parents give no boundaries to a kid. You know, you can do whatever. The child is a loose cannon, walking over others with no regard for them. Now, when he comes to your house, he climbs all over your furniture, opens the door. Yeah, he opens the kitchen cabinets, takes what he pleases. He doesn't distinguish between what is yours and what is his. That behavior is okay for a 2-year-old, but I've seen kids 10 or 12 years behaving like that. You know, it's not that the cookies in the cabinet really matter. It's that he's growing up with no respect toward other people's boundaries. The sixth observation, and I think I close. Boundaries have to be communicated and enforced to be effective. A parent who tells the 3-year-old not to get into the cookie jar and enforces the boundary is teaching that child something he will benefit from all her life. Later, when the child is working with his employer's money, he will understand that there is a difference between his own money and the money in the people's, in other people's jars. So, what I would say, dysfunctional people may have no sense of justice and what it will take from you and never give back, for example. There is another observation I made. I shouldn't forget that one. Boundaries are not inconsistent with Christian values of personal sacrifice and service. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you can't have a boundary. You know what I mean? Although, you know, I know Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, and whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him too. Give him who he asks you. And from him who wants to borrow from you, don't turn away. That's what he said in Matthew chapter 5. Is he saying have no boundaries? No. As a general statement, he's saying be generous, be benevolent. Give to other people rather than being selfish. But Scripture as a whole teaches us to set healthy boundaries. In the second letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 3, verse 10, Paul told the early church, set a boundary. If someone in the church would not work, then let him feel the consequence of that decision. Don't feed him. Let him get hungry enough to get up off his bottom and put his hand to the plow and go and work. Jesus himself set boundaries with people. When the people wanted to make him king, John 6:15, he withdrew himself from them. When Peter told Jesus, oh, you can't go to the cross, my Lord, you can't. Jesus rebuked him, and the family set a boundary. The difference between Christian sacrificial virtue and codependency has to do more with the inner motivation than the external behavior. I may choose to give my cloak as well as my coat. That's my decision. Yeah? That's my decision. I may turn the other cheek and defend myself. But that is my decision. I may go the second mile when one should have been sufficient. But I do it because I have decided that it's the most effective way to deal with the situation. I'm not doing it because I fear rejection, or I'm not doing it because of a severe need for approval from other people. Jesus washed the disciples' feet. You remember? Not because he wanted to be approved or to be praised. No. He wanted to teach them the value of humble service. He did it because his internal compass from the Father pointed him in that direction. He did always those things that pleased the Father. So, Paul wrote in Galatians chapter 1 verse 10, am I now trying to win the approval of men or of God? Am I trying to please men? Or if I was still trying to please men, I would not be a servant of Christ. So, let me ask, is it okay to say no to authority sometimes? Yes, at times that needs to be done. It needs to be done respectfully, but all human authority is limited in its scope and power. There is a limit to what a husband can require of a wife. There is a limit to what a political government can require of its citizens. When told to stop preaching Jesus, you remember when they were told, stop preaching that man? Peter told his government, we must obey God rather than man. So there is a limit on what spiritual authorities can require of people. There is a limit to what me as your pastor can require of you. Even when the early church was selling personal property and giving it to the church, Peter clearly said that was their free choice, if you remember. No one was required to do that. Acts chapter 4 verse 34 says that. We need to respect and honor authority, yes. God will not bless a rebellious spirit, but all human authority has limits and must respect certain boundaries. So, as I finish, how do we establish healthy boundaries? This provides a quick summary of what we have said so far. We begin by establishing appropriate boundaries on our own behavior in terms of self-discipline. Okay? That's number one. Then we respect the boundaries others set for our interaction with them. We don't manipulate or try to control them. They are free to make their own choices. And three, we determine what are the right and healthy boundaries for us in each of our relationships. Some people are healthy enough that we can have intimate and highly interdependent relationships. But some toxic people must be kept at a more distance for our own well-being. We draw relational lines that keep the interaction mutually beneficial or at least not detrimental to us. Boundaries can be communicated in subtle ways. When you begin a relationship, start cautiously and let the trust grow. People who have trouble with boundaries are sometimes so hungry for personal relationships that they open up too quickly. They offer more than they can deliver. Then it's challenging for them to tighten those boundaries later on. Nevertheless, that can be done and should be done if necessary. There is something else. Yes. We graciously share what we can with others while maintaining our own health at the same time. And let me give an example from the Bible. When the Good Samaritan saw a man in desperate need, he extended help to that man. But he also limited that help to what he could appropriately give. He got the man food, he gave him lodging and medical help. But at the same time, he went on to finish the trip that he was making. He didn't stop the trip. He said, now, I will leave you here, let this man help you. You see, Peter said to the man at the gate, beautiful, such as I have, I give to you. I don't have money, but I can give you something else. After a number of years of ministry, I have learned that sometimes I have to let somebody else do it, or I'm not going to survive. In some cases, I have to tell people, look, I wish I could do more, but there are other people I'm trying to help as well. I don't have that time now. Boundaries are not an excuse for living selfishly, but they are a way to stay healthy while we give of ourselves to others. They are a way for people to be made to experience their own consequences and learn from their own mistakes. Now, we invest the effort necessary for maintaining healthy boundaries. It requires some courage. It requires some straight talk, speaking the truth in love. Yeah, you must always, don't lie, don't manipulate and lie to people or flatter them. Tell them the truth in love. Sometimes we need support and help in the process. This is why codependents need a recovery program just as much as addicts do. Sometimes it can be very helpful to have a sponsor or a counselor to help us learn the skills and principles of maintaining healthy relationships. We've talked a lot about these boundaries because it's practical, it's a practical living. You see, the payoff is very big. If you can learn how to do these boundaries this well, the payoff is big. In a time, we discover a clearer sense of self-destiny, of self-identity, and self-esteem. We shake off the resentment of feeling used and abused. We reduce the pressure to find escape in a substance or addictive activity. We don't start to become alcoholic or addicted to drugs. We are not afraid of relationships because we know now how to limit them. You see, then we can go anywhere, we know, because we are not afraid that they may take us on and abuse us or misuse us. We become more enjoyable to be with because we know where to stop and where to start. And the people we deal with know where to start and where to stop. So, and therefore we enjoy being with others more. The payoff is big. And I pray that this revelation enters your hearts today. That relationships are kept by maintaining boundaries. The boundaries. May God bless you, my beloved.